Greetings, I am Pillar Nexus, the Ancient Gladiator, today with Pillar Loves Tabletop Games. Today's episode is The Lord of the Rings board game. This is the anniversary edition of the game, released originally in 2000. In this game, you are playing as the party of hobbits that is trying to get the ring to Mount Doom to destroy it. As part of this, you will play cards. You might have to deal with events, and you might even encounter the various noteworthy things from the story. Alright, so setup. Each player will take one of the Hobbit cards. The more players in the game, the more Hobbit cards available. It always starts out with Frodo, and then Sam. At 3 players is Pippin. At 4 is Merry. And 5 is Fatty. Yes, that's his name. It's in the books. So after everyone has their starting Hobbit, Frodo, player, will start with the ring and the threat die to represent that they're the active player. The remaining setup, the rider representing Sauron's power starts depending on how difficult you want the game. On 15, if you're playing for the first time, 12 for a normal game, or 10 if you feel like you really need a challenge. All hobbits start on 0. The deck of quest cards will be shuffled. The story tokens will be shuffled. They're intended to be on a stack, but due to the way these ones have been manufactured, stacking them makes for something very wobbly. I don't risk knocking it over. The 5 Gandalf cards will start in play face up. The initial party location marker starts on bag end. The various cards distributed in each safe haven and conflict area will be set aside, sorted by area if necessary. The various rune tokens will be sorted by value. The gold rune tokens will be shuffled face down and set to the side. And then the life tokens will be set nearby as they're picked up for the conflict. So the first round of this game is each player draws 6 cards, which I've already done. These are the quest cards. You will play these during conflicts or during events to make progress or prevent being set back. Once everyone has their 6 cards, the ring bearer has the option to risk rolling the threat die to draw a number of cards, to draw 4 cards and give them to the players as they see fit. Whenever you roll the threat die, whatever happens on the face up is what happens to you. So the circles represent corruption, the influence of the ring, moving you closer to Sauron. The eye moves Sauron closer to the players. The 2 rectangles mean you discard 2 cards from your hand. If you cannot discard cards and there is no otherwise option, you are eliminated from the game. The same thing happens with runes or other things that you would need to discard. And finally, and most thankfully, there is a blank space. Blank face. So we're going to choose not to take the risk. And finally, for bag end, the Nazgul appears. One player must discard 2 shields. The quest icons represent the following things. Axe and sword represents fighting. The shield represents hiding. Here. The Hobbit on foot represents travel. The Hobbit pipe represents fellowship or friendship. And finally, the star represents wild. Wild can be used for anything that requires a specific activity symbol. So let's say we have Frodo discard 2 shields right away. If I don't have someone discard 2 shields, Sora moves closer. The next step is Rivendell. The active player, again Frodo, will take the Rivendell specific cards and distribute them to the players currently at the table. They represent various characters and artifacts featured in the book or books. And then each player will take a card and pass it face down to the player to their left. And finally, each player will need to discard a Hobbit pipe symbol or roll the threat die. So it's possible to end up in a fairly difficult situation before the game's really even started. But after all that is the first conflict area. This is where most of the game is going to be happening across the various conflict zones, starting with Moria. So we start out there. The current ring bearer takes the first turn, and they have the following options to do. They can play up to 1 brown and up to 1 gray card. So showing those symbols, they will move along that track. If there's no symbol for that, if there's no track with that symbol, then nothing can be moved. Alternatively, you may have a star representing wild. Stars can be used for any of the tracks, can represent any activity symbol. Frodo has a very special ability in that he can use brown quest cards as wild. So we can move the fighting, and then we can move the shield to take the special item. These legendary items, you'll know that because they'll have that name. Once you use these, they are out of the game for the rest of the session. At some point, the discard pile will have everything that's currently left in the draw deck. I have it backwards. At some point, the draw deck will basically be in the discard pile, and then you'll need to reshuffle. These do not get reshuffled. Yeah. Things you can pick up along the track. Again, the items to go to your hand. Runes. By gathering runes, you can score extra points at the end of the game as long as it's a successful run. Runes, however, if you have 5 of them, and it has to be all you that has them, can be spent on Gandalf's cards. They can allow you to get 2 stars, towards and progressing on a track. Ignoring an event, as long as it's not the last event of the game. Rearrange the top 3 story tiles to affect their fate a bit. Go back 2 spaces on the corruption track. Or have any player draw 4 quest cards. You do not want to be too low on cards in this game. Other spaces include life tokens, represented with the ring, the heart, and the sun. You will need these at the end of a conflict to avoid taking corruption. The more effective. These black square spaces represent the threat die. So as you roll the move there, you'll roll and apply whatever effect is there to your character. The golden rune, you take a random tile from the randomly made set and turn it face up, and it goes to your collection. You can, I believe, you can spend them on Gandalf cards as well. But again, there are points at the end if you don't use them. Alternatively, during your turn, you have the option to refresh instead of playing cards. If you have one or more corruption, you can choose to go back 1. Instead of doing that, you can draw 2 cards. Either way, you will not be doing anything else this turn. And finally, there's a special interrupt that only the ring bearer can do. After the story tile is revealed, but before it's resolved, after the story tile is resolved, or after a player plays a card, the ring bearer can interrupt and put on the ring and roll the threat die. They are subject to whatever effect happens, and then they move any activity marker equal to 4 minus the number of symbols currently showing on the die. When they do that, they will ignore everything they move through and land on. But it's a way to end the conflict if a story tile ends up being an event. Well, let's talk with story tiles. When do they show up? So actually, before you do anything on your turn, you'll have to draw a story tile. I'm sorry I've gotten it backwards. Featuring the actions instead of the story tile. But it's worth paying attention to, because this hourglass brings you one step closer to your doom. An hourglass moves the event marker down, and this will have to be resolved. For example, the group discards a Hobbit pipe, or a fellowship symbol, and a star, otherwise Sauron moves closer. So between all these hobbits, they have to decide who's going to discard what and do so, or bad stuff happens. Other events will have their own rules. Again, they may require you to discard or otherwise happens. If there's no otherwise, then you have no choice but to discard or lose the game. Or remove yourself from the game. These tiles are drawn until an activity symbol is shown, at which point that marker goes up, the active player gets that bonus. There are other tiles as well that involve potentially moving the ring bearer closer along corruption, forcing someone to take 2 corruption or move Sauron closer, uh, requiring tiles requiring a sacrifice between the players of cards or certain items. Like this one requires 3. 3 cards discarded or the event marker moves. But in general, as long you'll keep pulling tiles until you pull an activity symbol. If you pull an activity symbol that's not on the board, you can move any one of them. If you pull a symbol for one that's already maxed out, you can move one of the other ones. Ultimately, what you're trying to do during the conflict is build up life tokens across your party so that they can avoid the corruption. Build up runes to have the power to tap into Gandalf's abilities. And ultimately end the conflict before the really bad stuff happens. You may get to a point where you're right on the verge of ending the conflict, but the events are still high up that you have time to work with. Use that time, if necessary, to draw more cards or get away from Sauron. When it starts looking like the really bad stuff's about to hit, that's when you push for the end. So, either, again, the last event is resolved, or the main activity marker is at the last space, that ends the conflict. When the conflict is ended, first we checked everyone's life tokens. Each Hobbit will take 3 corruption minus the number of life tokens they have. Merry is the exception. Merry only takes 2. And then the character with the most ring tokens becomes the new ring bearer. If there's a tie, the current ring bearer keeps the ring, as long as they're one of the tied players. If not, then the first player to their left becomes the new ring bearer. And then all the life tokens are returned. The new ring bearer will immediately draw 2 cards from the deck. If Fatty is in play, he will draw 2 cards for himself. So he's always on top of being ready for quests. And then once that's done, we'll move on to Lothlorien, where the Lothlorien cards will be distributed. Each player may give up 2 runes to draw 2 quest cards or take a step back from Sauron. And finally, each player will need to discard a star card or suffer the threat roll. And then the adventure goes on as follows. We go from Moria to Helm's Deep, which has a special 2-part track of you need to complete one part of the traveling and then complete the other half for certain effects. From Helm's Deep into Shelob's Lair, where you can recruit Golem briefly enough to use his 3 stars, but also at the cost of a threat roll. And finally, from the lair to Mordor, where all the tracks will be open. There's no more ring tokens to gather because now it's time to take the ring to the Mount Doom and destroy it. However, life tokens will come into play because certain events will hurt without them. In addition, these new spaces that show purity will help you take steps away from Sauron if you move on to them. At this point, the goal is to get to the last section here. In order to take this last move from this place to Mount Doom, it has to be the ring bearer playing the card to move right here. First, they have to survive the threat roll. If they do that, then they are free of the ring. And then starting with them, they can make a threat roll, and if they survive that, they destroy the ring and win the game. And also get a gold rune for bonus points. If trying to destroy the ring eliminates them from the game, then the next player in line gets to try, and so on and so forth, until everyone tries or everyone dies. Or someone succeeds, or everyone fails. So, player elimination, because I keep mentioning it, should go into detail. Again, you may be forced to discard cards or runes, and you can't do it. You will discard everything you have and be eliminated from the game. If it is the ring bearer that gets eliminated, then the game is over, unless we're playing with the rule that the next player in turn order gets to take the ring instead. This is the only circumstance where that can happen. The player can be eliminated by crossing Sauron, by going into their space. They're eliminated, they're the game. If they're the ring bearer, the game is over right now. There is no save against this. Finally, on this very critical final round of the game, if the event marker makes it to the final space of this track, the game ends right now. Regardless of how the game ends, players will score based on where the activity marker is on the track. So if they make it here, but they fail to destroy the ring, that's 60 points. If the ring is successfully destroyed, the points are as follows: 60 plus every unspent rune that they still have. And because the Gandalf options are so tempting, it's hard not to have. It's hard not to spend them when you really need it. But with careful planning, you can make that happen. All right. So why do I like this game? Well, first off, it's based, it's an adaptation of a book that does it well. The the instruction manual has in the back the synopsis of the story as well. If you're not familiar with it, like that's how I learned that Fatty is the Hobbit that covers for the rest of the guys while they're trying to sneak out and start their mission. The artwork is just incredible. The font choice is nice. It just looks very good between all the icons and everything. The figures are pretty cool. Although I remember a previous edition that had the uh the tower with Sauron's eye on it instead of the rider. I'm kind of on the fence on whether this is an improvement or a downgrade. The actual just system of play two cards or recover on your turn, but you've got limited time to work with is another plus. It is just the whole. There's two colors of cards that you can potentially play both as long as you've got them. That's an interesting system. All these all these various items to represent people and things from the story to add to that flavor and that immersion. fun. It's a very there's strategy. There's enough strategy and enough randomness that it works out. I think the one issue that I do have is you notice that I try not to stack these more than four for a little group for the stack. For some reason, the way they manufactured these, it's kind of wobbly. The center is just slightly thicker than the outside. But aside from that one little issue, this is just a great game. I This is a game I can mess with solo, even though they don't recommend it. Because apparently, you're not supposed to tell each other what you got in your hand, or you're not supposed to show each other, uh, your cards and all that. So you kind of have to communicate in an indirect way. But I still play it solo anyway. But this is also a good co-op game with people who appreciate, that, those works. Yeah, overall, it's just a really solid experience. And for a co-op game, like at the start of the 2000s, it was really something to see. Yeah, this is the anniversary edition, which I think adds a lot of the stuff that was uh, expansion things. I want to say either Rivendell or Lothlorien, or they added other stuff just to give the hobbits a better start. But this version just starts with it. So I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, this is just it's just a fun way to experience the story. You get to be part of the group. You get to play cards and contribute to the progress to get through it and try not to suffer the bad stuff. You know, it's interesting. I'll go with that. All right. If you get a chance, find the game. I was I was lucky to find a copy at the other game store in town. But this was like released 5 years ago. There's hopefully still copies, in print and going around. They've already sold a ton of it. So I'm sure it's a game that they can keep going for, keep available for a long time. So check it out. Play it, love it, share it, and just have fun. All right. Thank you very much for watching. It's been Pillar Nexus. I'll see you next time.